Hello, this is a lesson plan geared towards a first grade level classroom. It's an inclusive classroom with 18 students. The class consists of 2 students with disabilities. One student is diagnosed with ADHD and the other student has Asperger's syndrome. The objective for this lesson is that students will be able to create and explain a how-to based on something they know how to do. The learning targets for this lesson is that students will be able to identify and use sequence words in their writing. Students will be able to execute an appropriate how-to writing piece, and students will be able to appropriately and effectively work with peers in order to complete a task. The start of the lesson will begin with motivation. The teacher will tell the students that she loves peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and the teacher would ask the students who else loves peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. It is assumed that it'll be a large amount of students who have their hands up. Teacher will show students the materials such as the peanut butter, the jelly, and the bread. Students will be very curious and be engaged in what is happening. The teacher will tell students that she's going to make a sandwich with the class, but the teacher needs the students to help her remember the steps needed to make the peanut butter and jelly sandwich. This part of the lesson, the students are fully engaged and they're also fully in control because they're the ones who are dictating to the teacher how to do something. The next part of the lesson is the guided practice. Students will be asked what the word sequence means. This is a word that they're familiar with from math lessons because they would have practiced it with ordinal numbers and putting the numbers in order. Students will be told that we're going to do something very similar today using the word sequence, and it is a word that is already on our word wall from our previous math lessons. Teacher would explain to students that they will tell me how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but the students are going to have to explain every single step in order. And this is called a how-to because they're explaining how to do something by giving sequence of steps. So together the students will gather around the table and they'll volunteer steps as the teacher makes the sandwich. The next part of the lesson is modeling the whole process, and the teacher would begin by explaining that we successfully made a sandwich because they did so well letting the teacher know how to do it. The teacher will then show an education video, which is in this link right here from Brain Pop Jr. And this is a video that would be showing students exactly what a how-to is and also showing students how to execute and create a how-to. And after they watch the video, the students will join the teacher on a rug and they're going to discuss the sequence words needed to complete the how-to, such as first, next, then, after, and finally. And as the students are explaining this to the teacher is going to chart it for them. And over here you could see that this would be an example of a chart that the teacher would use. She would have the sequence words listed, and then the children will give the steps of making the peanut butter and jelly sandwich using the sequence words. The teacher will then display the finished chart and she'll read aloud every step with the class and emphasize the sequence words that are listed so the children can see exactly which order the sequence words come and which order all the steps come. This is something that would be put up in a visible area where students could refer to it throughout the unit, and also students will be able to refer to it during their activities and their independent practice. For independent practice, the children will work in pairs and they're going to brainstorm what do they both know how to do. So they have to come to a common ground of something that they both know how to do, and then together they're going to create the steps with sequence words, and they're going to write the steps using sequence words, and then they're going to present it to the class. Now there are differentiated instructional strategies. The lesson had to be modified for the student with Asperger's syndrome and the student with ADHD. So for the student with Asperger's syndrome, the first activity that is incorporated is a smartboard activity. And of course, this is an activity that you can use with gen ed students as well, but it is something mostly geared for a student with Asperger's syndrome. So the first activity strategy used would be the interactive smartboard. And the student would be putting this pictures in order of how to build a snowman into the correct order, but also it has the steps of how to put a snowman in order as well. So the student will match the picture with the sequence words and the sequence of events. So on one side, it'll have the words in order from the sequence of events from the first all the way down to last, and then over here would be the pictures in order. So you can see on both sides using animation and pictures of sequence events in order, and over here would be using the words putting the sequence of events in order. And the reason why I chose this is because students with Asperger need hands-on activities that will keep them engaged and focused. And they definitely need visuals to help enhance the knowledge that they are learning. This is another activity that is being used with a student with Asperger syndrome. And this is basically demonstrating sequence by showing and explaining it visually. So the student will be provided with a spoon, cereal box, and milk, and the student will demonstrate with the teacher's assistants how to eat cereal, and then verbally explain it using their sequence words. So with the teacher, the student would show the steps of how to make cereal, and then as they are doing each step physically, they will be explaining it verbally as well. And this allows the student to be able to show their knowledge and their understanding verbally rather than being forced to write something. Now for the student for ADHD, the differentiated instructional strategy that I used was an agenda. Now, students with ADHD usually suffer from having a hard time with change or transition. So the agenda will eliminate any surprise or anxiety for the student with ADHD. And the agenda will also break down the lesson for them in order for the student to understand every aspect of the lesson. And this is also going to give the student something to focus on rather than getting out of their seat or calling out. And it's also used kind of as a tool of self-evaluation for the student. So prior to the lesson, the teacher and the student will together make the agenda and discuss it. So here would be an example of agenda. The student will see exactly what's going to happen throughout the lesson. So first we're going to make the peanut butter and jelly sandwich, then we're going to watch the video, go to the rug and discuss steps, and then work with a partner and create a how-to. And throughout the whole lesson, the student will have boxes here that they'll be able to check off and mark off as they're done with that transition. Again, this is something that the student will have with them at all times, and the student will be able to eliminate any surprise or anxiety through transition of the lesson. And for assessments, the formative assessments, the most important things that I highlighted were discussions, which the students will be discussing how to make the peanut butter and jelly sandwich. They're responding to the questions of the steps that were demonstrated on chart paper. Another formative assessment would be observing the students' participation and focus, listening to the students brainstorming with their peer, and specifically and especially observing the student with Asperger syndrome while they're completing their activities, and then also observing the student with ADHD while they're following their directions through the entire lesson and keeping their focus and ability to follow directions. For my summative assessments, this would be their how-to presentations. So all the presentations that the students perform would be used as a summative. Also a follow-up assignment, which I figured would be that the students will be given scrambled sentence strips with scrambled pictures, and each student will have to match the sequence sentence with the picture that describes it, and then they could put it all in order. And then finally, the last part of it would be an end of unit test. And this is my lesson plan, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.